The father's justice. I buried my wife 6 months ago, and yesterday I saw her standing 3 aisles away from me, comparing paint colors like nothing had ever happened. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 58 years old. I spent 26 years married to a woman named Laura Carter, and I stood there in that store, frozen, staring at a face I had watched disappear beneath the ground. It wasn't someone who looked like her. It wasn't someone who sounded like her. It was her. Same brown hair, touched with gray. She used to complain about every morning. Same slight tilt of her head when she focused. Same quiet hum under her breath when she couldn't decide between two options. Details you don't mistake, not after half a lifetime. My hand went numb around the box of screws I'd been holding. It slipped, hit the floor, and scattered across the concrete. But I didn't even look down. Because Laura, my wife, the woman I buried, was alive. I walked toward her slowly, like my body was moving through something thick and unreal. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was trying to break out of my chest before my mind could catch up. "Laura," I said. Just her name. Nothing else came out. She turned, and for a fraction of a second, there it was. Recognition. A flicker in her eyes, fast, sharp, undeniable. Then it vanished, replaced by confusion, distance, something colder. "I'm sorry," she said, taking a small step back. "I think you have me confused with someone else." Someone else. The words didn't just land, they cut. "No," I said, stepping closer. "Laura Carter. I'm Daniel." She tightened her grip on the paint samples in her hand, like they were something solid she could hide behind. "My name is Rachel Brooks," she replied, calm, practiced. "I don't know you." Rachel Brooks. No hesitation, not uncertainty. A name ready, waiting. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and opened the last photo we took together, our anniversary dinner. The blue dress she loved, the smile I thought I understood. "Look at this," I said. "Tell me that's not you." She glanced at the screen. And again, just for a second, that same flicker. Then she shook her head. "That woman looks similar," she said quietly, "but it's not me." And just like that, she turned and walked away. No panic, no urgency, no explanation. Just gone. I stood there in the middle of that aisle, surrounded by strangers, holding a phone full of memories that suddenly felt like evidence from someone else's life. 6 months ago, I stood beside a grave, watching them lower a coffin into the ground. 6 months ago, I believed I had buried my wife. But if Laura Carter was standing in that store, alive, breathing, walking away from me like I meant nothing, then one question started repeating in my head, louder with every second. If she's alive, who the hell did I bury? That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a house that suddenly felt unfamiliar, like I had been living inside someone else's version of my life. Because once the shock faded, something else took its place. Doubt. Not loud at first, just small details, quiet inconsistencies I had ignored when grief was louder than logic. The funeral. Closed casket. I remember standing there, asking if I could see her one last time, just once, just to say goodbye properly. But Ethan had stepped in. "Dad, you don't want to remember her like that," he said, his voice steady. Too steady. The accident was bad. Really bad. At the time, I believed him. Because that's what grief does. It makes you accept what you're told. Because questioning it feels worse than the truth. But now I couldn't stop thinking about it. I never saw her face. Not at the hospital. Not at the funeral. Not even for a second. I buried a sealed box and called it closure. Then there was the insurance. 26 years of marriage, and I knew every policy we had, every premium, every clause. Life insurance claims don't move fast. They get reviewed, questioned, delayed. But this one, cleared in days. Approved without pushback, no investigation, no complications. At the time, I told myself it was luck. efficiency, maybe even mercy. Now, it felt like something else, like paperwork that had already been prepared before I even knew I needed it. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, trying to slow everything down, piece by piece, step by step. That's how I was trained to think. I'm an engineer. I don't deal in feelings, I deal in patterns. And patterns don't lie, even when people do. Closed casket. No visual confirmation. Fast-tracked insurance payout. A son who answered questions, but never too directly. Individually, each detail meant nothing. Together, they formed something else. A system. And systems don't happen by accident. They're designed. I opened my eyes and looked around the room, at the framed photos, the furniture we picked together, the life I thought I understood. Then I said it out loud for the first time. This wasn't a mistake. My voice sounded calm, but it didn't feel that way. Because if Laura hadn't died, then everything I had lived through for the past 6 months wasn't grief. It was deception, carefully built, carefully executed, and handed to me while I was too broken to question it. And the worst part wasn't the possibility that my wife had lied to me. It was the realization that I might not have been the only one who knew. Because the moment I replayed that conversation in my head, the way Ethan avoided a direct answer, the way he redirected, softened, controlled what I saw and what I didn't, it stopped feeling like protection and started feeling like participation. That's when the question changed. It wasn't just, is Laura alive? It became something much heavier. How many people knew and chose to let me bury a lie? The next morning, I went back. Same parking lot, same store, same entrance. I sat in my truck with the engine off, hands resting on the wheel, waiting. Because if there was one thing I trusted more than memory, it was routine. People don't change their habits easily, not even when they change their lives. 3 hours passed. Then, she appeared, walking through those automatic doors like she had done it 100 times before, calm, focused, pushing a cart as she belonged there, like she had always belonged somewhere else. Laura, or Rachel. This time, I didn't call her name. I stayed in the shadows, and I followed. She moved with purpose, not confusion, straight through the aisles, picking items without hesitation. This wasn't a woman hiding. This was a woman living. When she checked out, I kept my distance, watched her walk to the parking lot, watched her unlock a white Honda Civic I had never seen before. Not our car, not anything connected to the life we built. She drove off, and I followed. 15 minutes. That's all it took to leave my world behind. We entered a quiet neighborhood, small houses, clean yards, the kind of place people move to when they're starting over or pretending to. She turned into the driveway of a pale yellow house. And then, everything broke. A man stepped out to meet her. Mid-40s, grease stains on his shirt, hands that told you he worked with tools, not spreadsheets. He smiled when he saw her. Not politely, not casually. He leaned in and kissed her cheek. Familiar, comfortable, intimate, like it was something they had done every day for years. I felt something in my chest tighten, not sharp, just heavy. Then the front door opened. A little girl ran out, maybe 8 years old, small, bright, full of that kind of energy you don't fake. She ran straight to Laura, wrapped her arms around her waist, and laughed. "Grandma Rachel." The words hit harder than anything else. Not Laura, not my wife. Grandma Rachel. I sat there in silence, watching through the windshield like I didn't belong to my own life anymore. She bent down, smiled, held the child like it was the most natural thing in the world, like she had always been there, like the past 26 years never existed. The man carried groceries inside. She followed. The door closed behind them. And just like that, a whole life continued. Without me, I stayed there longer than I should have. Minutes turned into hours, but I couldn't move, Because I wasn't just watching a lie. I was watching a replacement. A new name. A new house. A new man. A new family. And she fit into it perfectly. No hesitation. No cracks. No signs that anything had ever gone wrong. That's when it finally hit me. This wasn't something she ran into. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was something she built. Carefully. Quietly. Completely. And I had never seen it coming. As I sat there, staring at that yellow house, one thought settled in, cold and steady. I didn't just lose my wife 6 months ago. I had already lost her, long before that. I just didn't know it yet. That night, I stopped guessing. I went looking for proof. Not memories, not emotions, not explanations that made things easier to accept. Proof. I started in the bedroom, the closet, the places I hadn't touched since the funeral, the places I told myself I wasn't ready to go through. Turns out, I wasn't avoiding grief. I was avoiding answers. I pulled out the storage box Laura always said was just old paperwork, bills, taxes, things not worth keeping organized. She never liked paperwork. She used to joke that I handled numbers, so she didn't have to. That was the first lie. Because what I found was organized. Carefully. Deliberately. Not like clutter, but like a system. I spread everything across the dining table, page by page, line by line. Bank statements, not ours. Different account numbers, different institutions. Balances that didn't belong to any shared plan we had ever made. Small transfers at first, then the larger ones. Consistent. Quiet. Like someone siphoning water from a tank, just enough so no one notices until it's half empty. Then I found the name. Rachel Brooks. Not written once, but everywhere. Utility applications, credit card forms, medical records, even a rental agreement dated years back, signed under that name. Years. This didn't start recently. This didn't start when things got bad or when someone made a mistake. This started while we were still living the life I thought was real. While I was working overtime to pay off the house faster. While I was putting money aside for Ethan. While I believed we were building something together. She was building something else. A second identity. A parallel life. And she didn't just create a name. She created history. There was a P.O. box registered under Rachel Brooks, active for over 2 years. Mail forwarding requests. Separate phone numbers. Insurance documents tied to that identity. Every piece connected, every detail accounted for. I picked up one of the papers and just stared at it, trying to find something that felt like a mistake. Something rushed. Something emotional. There was nothing. No panic. No shortcuts. Only precision. That's when the truth shifted from possibility to certainty. This wasn't an escape. This wasn't something she decided overnight. This was engineering. Planned. Tested. Executed. I leaned back in my chair. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. And for the first time, I stopped asking why. Because the why didn't matter anymore. The how told me everything. She didn't leave me. She replaced me, piece by piece, document by document, until the version of her that belonged to my life was the one who got buried. I looked down at the name again. Rachel Brooks. Not an alias. Not a disguise. A fully constructed person. And somewhere along the way, Laura Carter had become the lie. I stared at the name on that paper for a long time. Then I reached for my phone. There was only one person left to call. Ethan, my son, the boy I had raised, trusted, believed, would stand beside me when everything else fell apart. He answered on the first ring. Dad? His voice sounded normal, too normal. I need to ask you something, I said. My tone was steady, controlled, and I need the truth. A pause. Small. But there. Okay. Did you ever actually see your mother's body? Silence. Not confusion, not shocked. Silence. Ethan, I repeated, yes or no? Another pause. Longer this time. No, he finally said. But Dad, we talked about this. The accident was… That's not what I asked. My voice didn't rise, but it cut through whatever he was trying to build. Did you see her? No. The word landed flat. Final. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them again. I saw her yesterday. That did it. The breath on the other end changed. No surprise. Recognition. I saw her, I continued. Alive. Different name. Different life. So, I'm going to ask you again, and this time you're going to tell me everything. Nothing. Then, I'm sorry, Dad. 4 words. Soft. Broken. And they hit harder than anything else he could have said. How long? I asked. Another pause, but this one felt different. Defeated. About 3 years. 3 years. 3 years of dinners, conversations, holidays. 3 years of him looking me in the eye, knowing the truth, and saying nothing. I found out by accident, he said quickly. I was helping with the business paperwork, and I saw things that didn't add up. Accounts, bills, another address. And you didn't tell me. I confronted her, he said. She broke down. She said she made a mistake, that she didn't know how to fix it without destroying everything. Everything. The word echoed. She said you'd never agree to a divorce, he continued, voice shaking now. She said you'd fight her for the house, the money, everything you built. I let out a slow breath. So she decided it was easier to die. It wasn't like that, Ethan said quickly. She was scared, Dad. She thought it would be cleaner, easier for everyone. Easier? For who? I asked. He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. She said once the insurance paid out, he went on, quieter now. I could help manage things, make sure you were taken care of. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. She didn't want to lose half in a divorce, he added. She said she deserved something after 26 years. Something. I stood there, gripping the edge of the table, feeling something shift inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Something heavier. And you agreed, I said. I didn't know the whole plan at first, he said quickly. I swear, I thought it was just an affair, something temporary. But then it got bigger and you stayed. Silence. Again. That silence told me more than anything else. I thought I was protecting her, he said finally. And you, I thought if you never knew, it wouldn't hurt you. I let that sit between us for a moment. Then I spoke. You stood next to me at her funeral. His breathing hitched. You watched them lower that coffin, I continued, my voice steady, almost quiet. You watched me break, and you said nothing. I'm sorry. You let me grieve someone who wasn't dead. I didn't know how to stop it. No, I said softly, you just chose not to. That was the moment. Not when he confessed. Not when he explained. But when I realized something simple and final. My son hadn't just known. He had decided. Chosen a side. And it wasn't mine. I looked down at the papers scattered across the table, at the name Rachel Brooks, at the life that had replaced mine. Then I spoke one last time. You didn't just lie to me, Ethan. My voice didn't shake. You helped her bury me. After I hung up, the room felt different. Quieter, colder, like the truth had finally settled into place. Because now, it wasn't just suspicion. It was structured. A system. I sat down and went back through the papers. This time not as a husband looking for answers, but as an engineer breaking down a design. And suddenly, everything made sense. It started with the identity. Rachel Brooks wasn't just a name she picked out of nowhere. It was built, layer by layer, document by document. A PO box to receive mail. A separate phone line. Utility accounts opened under that name. Medical records, credit history, even a rental agreement going back years. This wasn't an escape plan. It was a parallel life, running quietly beside mine. Then came the trigger. The death. Except, it wasn't hers. Frank Miller. I found the name buried in a set of documents tied to a hospital record, and once I saw it, the pattern locked into place. A homeless man, terminally ill, no immediate family that would ask questions, someone who could disappear without anyone noticing the details. She didn't just find him, she selected him, the perfect substitute. From what Ethan had said, she had been in contact with him long before everything happened, offering money, arranging timing, making sure when the moment came, everything would line up. When Frank Miller died, the system activated. His identity became the body. The body became Laura Carter. Closed casket, severe accident. No viewing, no verification. Just signatures, paperwork, and grief used as a shield. And while I stood there, mourning, believing, breaking apart, she was already gone. Already Rachel Brooks. Already living in that yellow house. Then came the payout, the life insurance. $150,000, processed faster than it ever should have been. Because to the system, everything looked clean. A death certificate, a grieving husband. No disputes, nothing to question. Except the truth had already been removed from the equation. I leaned forward, staring at the table, connecting every step. Identity created. Exit staged. Replacement body. Insurance triggered. New life activated. No gaps. No overlaps. No emotion. Just execution. That's what hit me the hardest. Not the betrayal. Not even the loss. But the precision. Because I had spent my entire life building things. Systems that had to work under pressure. Systems that couldn't fail. And what she created didn't fail. It worked exactly as designed. I thought back to the last few years, the small moments I never questioned. The extra errands, the unexplained absences, the way she sometimes felt distant, like part of her attention was somewhere else. It wasn't distance. It was a division. She wasn't slipping away. She was transitioning from one life to another. And I never saw it. Because I was looking at her through emotion, while she was operating through logic. I sat there for a long time, letting it settle. Then I said it quietly, not to anyone else, just to myself. This wasn't about leaving me. It never was. This was about replacing me, without consequences. And for 6 months, it worked. The next morning, I stopped sitting in the wreckage. I started moving. Because there's a point where pain stops being something you feel and becomes something you either act on or let define you. I wasn't going to let it define me. I didn't want revenge. Revenge is emotional, unpredictable, messy. What I wanted was something cleaner. Justice. I opened my laptop and searched for one thing. Private investigator, financial fraud. That's how I found Victor Hayes. Former detective, 25 years on the force, specialized in fraud, identity theft, and missing persons. His office wasn't impressive. A small space in a strip mall, between a tax service and a sandwich shop. But when I walked in, I knew I was in the right place. Victor didn't waste time with sympathy. He listened, quietly, carefully. I laid everything out on his desk. The documents, the accounts, the identity of Rachel Brooks. What Ethan had told me, what I had seen with my own eyes. He didn't interrupt, didn't react, just absorbed it. When I finished, the room went still. He flipped through the papers slowly, stopping on certain pages longer than others, connecting things without saying it out loud. Finally, he looked up. "If this holds," he said calmly, "this isn't just a domestic situation." I didn't respond. I already knew that. "This is fraud," he continued. "Identity theft, conspiracy, multiple charges, serious ones." There was no shock in his voice. No drama. Just facts. "What do you want to do?" he asked. That question mattered, because the answer would define everything that came next. I took a moment. Not to think, But to be sure, I don't want to scare them, I said. I looked him straight in the eye. I don't want to threaten them. I paused, then finished it. I want proof, not suspicion, not anger, not stories that could be twisted or denied. Proof that would hold, in a courtroom, under pressure, against every excuse they could build. Victor nodded once. Then we do this properly, he said. No shortcuts. No confrontation. No warning. We build the case, piece by piece, until there's nothing left to argue. He closed the folder and slid it back toward me. This will take time, he added, and it won't stay quiet forever. I'm not interested in quiet, I replied. For the first time since I walked in, he gave a small, knowing look. Because he understood. This wasn't a man chasing emotion. This was a man who had been lied to, calculated against, erased from his own life. And now, I was done reacting. I was ready to act. I stood up, leaving the folder on his desk. Find everything, I said. Every step, every account, every lie. Victor nodded again. And just like that, it stopped being my story alone. It became a case. The investigation didn't start with confrontation. It started with silence. Days passed without updates. Then weeks. And in that time, I learned something I hadn't understood before. Truth doesn't arrive all at once. It builds, quietly, patiently, piece by piece, until it becomes impossible to ignore. Victor called me exactly 2 weeks later. I have had enough, he said. You need to see this. When I walked into his office, the folder he placed on the desk was 3 times thicker than the one I had brought him. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. This was structured, documented. He opened it slowly and began. Your wife didn't just move money, he said. She redirected it. Bank records filled the first section. Accounts I had never seen tied to Rachel Brooks. Transfers that started small, almost invisible, then grew over time. Consistent patterns. Strategic timing. Money moved in ways that avoided detection, never enough to trigger alerts, but enough to build something substantial over the years. She started at least 2 years before the death, Victor added. 2 years. While we were still living under the same roof. While I believed everything was stable. Then came the next layer. Property records. The yellow house. Purchased in cash, under the name Rachel Brooks, months before Laura Carter was declared dead. Not after. Before. That detail changed everything. It meant the life I saw wasn't a reaction. It was already waiting. Already prepared. Already paid for. Victor flipped to the next section. Phone records. This one, he didn't need to explain. I saw the names myself. Rachel Brooks. Ethan Carter. Call logs. Text exchanges. Dates. Times. Not just before the funeral. After. Regular contact. Ongoing. Consistent. Even after Ethan stood in front of me, apologized, told me everything. He was still talking to her. Still part of it. Your son didn't just know, Victor said quietly. He stayed involved. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Because the numbers didn't lie. And neither did the pattern. Every piece pointed in the same direction. Coordination. Planning. Execution. Victor continued. We also confirmed the identity switch. Frank Miller. Hospital records. Time of death. Cremation authorization. Signed documents that tied his remains to Laura Carter's name. Money transferred to a distant relative, paid for silence. No loose ends. No inconsistencies. Just a clean substitution, hidden behind grief and paperwork. He closed the folder halfway, then looked at me. This is a prosecutable case, he said. Not theory. Not an assumption. A case. Every transaction is documented. Every connection traceable. Every step is supported by records that would hold up to scrutiny. Financial fraud. Identity theft. Conspiracy. Multiple charges. Layered. Reinforced. I leaned back slightly. taking it all in. Not emotionally, not anymore. Just clearly, because this was no longer about what I felt. It was about what could be proven. Victor tapped the folder once. "I can hand this to an attorney today," he said. "Warrants won't take long." I nodded slowly, because the truth had reached its final form. Not a story, not a betrayal, a system, exposed. And now, there was only one step left. Make it official. It happened faster than I expected. Once the case was filed, the system moved. No warnings, no second chances, no time for them to adjust the story. They arrested Laura first. Rachel Brooks, standing in that yellow kitchen, making lunch like it was any other day. Victor called me when it happened. "She didn't resist," he said, "just asked for a lawyer." Of course she did. Because this time, the system wasn't hers. 2 hours later, they picked up Ethan. At his apartment, no hesitation, no confusion, just consequences, catching up. He called me that night. "Dad, please," he said. His voice was different now. Not controlled, not measured, desperate. "We can fix this. We can pay it back. Mom's scared. She doesn't belong in there." I listened, but I didn't interrupt, because for the first time, I wasn't reacting to him as a father. I was hearing him as part of the case. "You helped her fake her death," I said calmly. "You let me grieve a lie." "Dad," I thought. "I know what you thought." I paused. "And now, this is what it costs." Silence followed. He didn't argue again, because there was nothing left to defend. The trial took months. Laura pleaded not guilty. Her defense, exactly what Victor predicted. Abuse. Control. A marriage she claimed she had to escape. But the evidence didn't bend. Financial records, identity documents, timeline consistency. Everything aligned too cleanly, too precisely, for emotion to rewrite it. Witnesses spoke. Neighbors, colleagues, people who had seen us for years. Not perfection, but nothing that matched the story she tried to build. And in the end, facts won. Ethan took a plea deal before the verdict. 18 months. Probation. Full restitution. He stood there, eyes lowered, no longer trying to explain. Laura wasn't offered the same. 3 years. The judge called it calculated, deliberate, exploitative. She never looked at me. Not once. Not when the sentence was read. Not when they took her away. Like I had already been erased, long before the courtroom. After it was over, I saw Ethan one last time. He hesitated, then stepped closer. "Dad, I'm sorry." I looked at him. Really looked this time. Not at the boy I raised, but at the man who made his choice. "I know," I said, and I meant it. That was the hardest part. Not the betrayal, not even the loss, but understanding that he believed he was doing the right thing and walking away anyway. Because some lines, once crossed, don't lead back. It's been a while now, long enough for the noise to fade and for something quieter to take its place. Clarity. I got most of the money back, not all of it, but enough to rebuild without looking over my shoulder. The house feels different now. Not empty, just honest. No hidden layers, no second meanings. Just what it is. Ethan writes to me sometimes. Short letters, careful words. I read them, but I don't rush to answer. Not out of anger, because that's gone. Anger burns fast and leaves nothing useful behind. What stays is understanding. I know who he is now. I know who Laura chose to become. And more importantly, I know who I am. There's a strange kind of peace in that. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But acceptance. Because the truth is, trust isn't broken in a moment. It's replaced, slowly, by decisions you never see coming. And when it finally surfaces, it doesn't just change how you see others. It changes how you see everything. People ask me if I regret what I did, if I should have handled it differently, if I should have protected my family instead of exposing them. I don't give them a long answer, because it's actually simple. I didn't choose revenge. I chose truth. And truth has consequences. So now I'll ask you something. If you were standing where I stood, if the people you trusted most had rewritten your life behind your back, would you choose to forgive them? Or would you choose justice?